Freedom Advocates exists in order to promote the public understanding of the importance of the political recognition of each of our unalienable rights. This became an issue to us at the beginning of the 21st century as we began to understand the nature of the Agenda 21 program, the program for collectivization, global collectivization, operated through the United Nations and its affiliates. Agenda 21 policies were deep into my community, which is really, as I learned, the sample patch for the implementation of Agenda 21, or sustainable development, within the United States. Today, Santa Cruz has been surpassed by many counties who have implemented this program far more than we have. But be assured that whatever county in America you live in today, you have an Agenda 21 sustainable development program in process. It is working to affect the goals of Agenda 21, which can really be summarized in 3 points and supported by the documents prepared at the United Nations. Those 3 points are: first, the abolition of private property. This is why the pressure is mounting on landowners across America. Soon that battle is going to shift into suburban neighborhoods, and the battle for the resettlement of our suburban neighborhoods will begin. Agenda 21 will not stop its process until all the world is collectivized. Now, the second major program for this collectivization is called the Global Citizenship Education Program. This is best evidenced by review of the federal No Child Left Behind legislation and all the series of legislations that have come along in the last several decades following the establishment of the Federal Department of Education. You see, Agenda 21 comes into the United States because President George Bush Sr., this is 1992, went to Rio de Janeiro, and on Prince Charles's yacht, he signed to the American agreement to the standards of Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and he promised to return to America and infest every federal agency with Agenda 21 principles. You see, this was soft law from the United Nations, not requiring treaty approval. Simply administrative process was sufficient. So beginning in 1992, George Bush brought it to our federal agencies. Today, you can review the websites of any federal agency and you can find references to Agenda 21 or Sustainable Development regularly. But what's more important, you see the policies coming out from our federal government into every state and every county are in the process of implementing this global regime. So once our children are educated for the process of global citizenship, we begin to observe the third dynamic behind Agenda 21 Sustainable Development, and that is control over and ultimately massive reduction in human population. You say, oh, that can't be. I say, well, it is so. It's contained in the UN's document, Global Biodiversity Assessment Report, which calls for reduction of human population. The way we get there is by changing the way we live. It's creating wildlands throughout the United States where human beings will not be allowed to either reside or extract materials. Human beings are to be congregated in smart growth communities. That's why you see in every community in California and across the country the push for walkable communities, which means you live on the 20th floor and you walk downstairs, where smart growth cages are really built for the American citizens. And we thought the one way in and one way out of Polish cities was a dangerous mistake. Well, smart growth is designed to take control over all human action. The Wildlands Project is designed to reduce us to abjects of poverty. World government is the program behind the Democrat Party and Republican Party sponsored Agenda 21 program. Your local politicians are paid by parties who support the globalization, including the destruction of America, because the programs of sustainable development have been in process for a lot longer than simply since 1992. But the acceleration since then has been overwhelming, and accounts for the apparent crumbling of our fiat money system. So what I suggest, because this is a gloomy picture, what I suggest is first that people take reasonable steps to prepare for the worst. Now, I could see the worst to include the destruction of our currency. Now, that doesn't mean anyone should lose confidence in our fiat reserve money, not until we have it replaced. But in case those on the inside of the fiat system decide to subjugate the world by collapsing their monetary system, it is important that you have something with which you can barter. It is also important that you have access to food and to water. It is clear you want to be out of debt. Because if you're in debt, you become chattel of this new world order. Now, mortgage debt may be a slightly different circumstance. But if one can find themselves in a position to own their home outright, they'll find themselves much happier for having done so. Once you've prepared for the possible worst and you have your access to food and water and barter material, then you want to understand what sustainable development is, because its completion is not a fait accompli. The battle is in their terms, a global to local battle. That means they infuse your community with sustainable development policy. Come to understand that policy and strike at it at every turn. Even those programs that might appeal to you for some undefined reason need to be understood if they fit in the context of sustainable development, and almost nothing coming from our city councils and county commissioners today do not reflect that. Again, it's because the parties are controlled by the agents of world government.
Thanks, Council. My name is John Bush. I'm speaking on behalf of Texans for Accountable Government. It's a newly formed political action committee. I'm going to give a little history lesson about how this point of sale ordinance, is there an actual name for it now? What should I call it?
Well, I think it's generally referred to as our energy efficiency upgrades.
Okay, the energy efficiency upgrade, that sounds better, ordinance. A little history lesson on how that ties in with something called Agenda 21, which is a United Nations program from 1992 on sustainable development. If the links I'm about to present allude to thoughts of international conspiracies, that's okay. They're supposed to. You see, when the Austin City Council approves the energy efficiency upgrade resolution, it will be one further step in the culmination of a long chain of events, policy papers, closed-door meetings, international agreements, and all-around chicanery that began many years ago. Before carbon was thought of as the most evil thing in the world, there were individuals who I'm referred to as internationalists, hashing out a plan to further their scheme for world government through the means of excessive environmentalism. Let's trace the path of what eventually would become the Energy Efficiency Upgrade Ordinance. Believe me, it's worth noting where all this is coming from, because there's many other ordinances and environmental action that the City Council will be taking in the near future. Agenda 21 was revealed at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, or the Earth Summit, which was held in Rio de Janeiro on June 14, 1992. Agenda 21 defines itself as a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system in order to further the agenda of sustainable development. This is actually where we get the term sustainable development from Agenda 21. Amongst the stated objectives of Agenda 21 is the rewilding of America through the Wildlands Project. This project would remove human beings from over half of the land in America and deem these areas core wilderness zones. Regardless of where your family farm once was, human beings will not be allowed to set foot in these areas. There would also be highly controlled and monitored buffer zones around these areas in which travel would be severely limited. Finally, humans would be forced to live in compact, futuristic cities full of skyscrapers where travel is controlled and tracked. This is what the eventual culmination of smart growth is going to look like. It sounds crazy, I know. I was just as dubious when I first heard about it too. However, upon reading their own documents, it turns out that it's all true. It's called the Wildlands Project. part of Agenda 21. I suggest you all look into it in detail because you're about to pass an ordinance that's beginning the process. The point of sale ordinance is part of the Austin Climate... What I thought was really crazy, however, is that the Mayor's Climate Protection Program is furthering the implementation of Agenda 21 here in Austin, and we're about to vote on it here. So here's the connection between the point of sale ordinance and Agenda 21. Very interesting stuff. And again, I highly recommend reading Agenda 21. The point of sale ordinance is part of the Austin Climate Protection Program. Mayor Wynn didn't just come up with this wonderful plan off the top of his head. It's Austin's version of the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, which came out of the U.S. Conference on Mayor's Climate Protection Summit in February 2005. The summit was hosted and funded by the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, a United Nations organization. Funded by tax-exempt institutions such as the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation, the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives is the primary group that has been driving the implementation of Agenda 21 at the local level. And this is from Agenda 21, Chapter 28. Because so many of the problems and solutions being addressed by Agenda 21 have their roots in local activities, the participation and cooperation of local authorities will be a determining factor in fulfilling its objectives. So basically, many of the tenets in the Mayor's or the Austin Climate Protection Program have their origins in Agenda 21, which I see as a globalist push to use environmentalism as a means of global control. It sounds like an Orwellian conspiracy theory, I know. It's funny because we now have a regional secretariat of the United Nations for the International Council on Local Environmental Initiatives, and it's called the ICLEI Oceania. And that's, of course, the name for one of the regional bodies in 1984. Now, I know it's kind of creepy that the aspects of a suppressed 1992 UN document, which if executed would greatly diminish the national sovereignty of the United States, are being voted on right here, right now. But I also feel that the prospect of government punishing its citizens if they do not complete a mandatory audit and disclose all historic energy use to the city, the buyer, and eventually to an international body, this is how it starts. Slowly but surely, it sounds like a good thing, but now pretty soon we'll be giving up even more of our sovereignty. I believe that this violates the core essence of private property, which is a major tenet that this country was founded upon. Also, it seems to be the sentiment of some on the council that if these measures, they could potentially become mandatory if voluntarism does not work. The group I represent and myself are greatly opposed not only to the prospect of mandatory upgrades, but the audit to the mandatory audit itself. We see this measure as the essence of government, both local and in the future international, as intruding on the free market and an intrinsic right to private property. This begins at the local level, but as we see, localism then turns to state or national regulation, and in the not-so-distant future with the push for globalism, this will be governed by an international body as part of the United Nations through Agenda 21. I know it sounds crazy again, but this is all fact, everything that I've stated. It is for these reasons and many more that Texans for Accountable Government is opposed to the point-of-sale ordinance or the energy efficiency upgrade ordinance. And I hope that you guys will actually read Agenda 21 because many of the things that you're going to be implementing in the future are directly a result of Agenda 21. Thank you.